register my appreciation for all that he has been to the department and all that he has been to the journalism field in India, I would say, because he's been part of the national media also. Whenever I think of Nagesh, the idea of a public intellectual and their role in the community comes to mind. I think he represents something, an ideal of a public intellectual. He has not only influenced the whole generation of students who have passed through the department, but he has also demonstrated to us that if you're a journalism teacher, what all you can do. You can be an active participant in a range of journalism activities. He's been a part of print media, electronic media, and now, of course, he's a star in the digital space too. So it's a whole range of experiences, and he has demonstrated to us what all can be done. And when someone like that teaches or speaks, there's an enormous credibility that gives that person, whatever he's saying, it has a tremendous amount of credibility. For me, while there is a multifarious talent here, for me the most important thing has always been that you have to have your heart in the right place and you have to speak for the right things in the right way from a right perspective. By right, I mean on the side of those who do not have power, resources and other things in society. Stand up for those people. There are many successful people all over, but they use their success in a very different way for very different purposes. They speak for, not always in public interest. I think one of the most important things about him, I mean there may be many talented people, I think one of the most important things about him for me is the fact that he uses all that in public interest. So I'm quite privileged to come and register my appreciation here today for him. And I'm sure he's going to be a bigger figure in the media now that he is not part of the university system and he can fly higher, because the constraints of institutional frameworks always keep you a little down. Now he doesn't have that. He can speak up more for more issues. About the general theme, there are days when I feel that the journalism that we grew up with and that we understood in 70s, we were students of the 70s batches. I feel that probably that's already past. There's no future for that, one feels, on low days. Because the kind of things that we learned in the journalism classroom about journalistic values, the role of journalism in society, things like that, by the time we were teaching in the mid-80s and 90s already, students who went away into the field, became journalists, would come back and tell us in a very cynical tone, "Ma'am, what in classroom doesn't apply in real life. There is a whole world out there which doesn't believe in any of it." And I wish, and those days we used to object to those statements, and I wish sincerely that these students did not succumb to that cynicism at that time. Many of them went and said, "That's how the world is and we are going to adjust." You know, you are adjusting to a maladjusted society. There is a dysfunctional society. Instead of fixing it or in any way pushing back a little bit, in whatever way little way you can, you have succumbed and you have adjusted to that dysfunctions. And look where we are today. The mainstream journalism, I don't know what you can call it, Many people are openly, senior journalists are openly saying that that's no longer journalism, that's not journalism. It is a form of propaganda, form of disinformation, misinformation, aggression, all kinds of other things are happening in the name of journalism. And a total capitulation to power. So that is a thing that has happened and it was not stopped in time, which could have been stopped in time. Anyway, so that transition, big transition has happened. And so the journalism that we learned in classrooms in those days, probably it's also not fair to expect anything that is in the past to continue the way it is. Things change, technology changes, people change, circumstances change, economies change, and all that happened with us also. But still, I feel fundamentally at the root of it, there are certain core things that you can not deny. For instance, if you want to be a good journalist, ability with language, nuance, understanding how to put across things, all those things are fundamental talent. Whether you write, speak on television, or whatever you do, the language abilities are important. So we must continue to emphasize those things in the classroom. Also the commitment to what we call social responsibility, whatever. At whatever historical time we are functioning, we must have the understanding or the perspective to sense what is happening around us. A lot of times I find that many of the journalists are constantly in touch with power, deal with power, are running around power, and forget that there is a whole society which is subject to this power, experiencing the consequences of this power, completely impacted by this power that's being exercised. And our discourse in journalism has become only about the interactions of the power and the upper part of society. We're forgetting to go down and see what is happening at the ground many times. So the other side of the story, for some time Sainath used to say that, there's no poverty in India, nobody. At a time when farmer suicides were happening, hundreds of people were in crisis. The cover stories on India Today and some of the major magazines were about slimming clinics. There is starvation on the one hand, but you have this going on at the catering to a certain class, powerful class, upper caste, upper whatever, not remembering that the majority in the country today is still 80% who are receiving those rations are in a desperate situation. They may not be fully starving, but there is a desperation of sorts, economic and social desperation, and a lot of cracks in society which are being exploited for various reasons to keep people engaged with things that don't matter. So the journalism that we thought should be our ideal has been given the go-by, and something else is happening. And much of the structural thing, as Uma was so comprehensively describing in the morning about the business models and who owns the media or whatever, we all are familiar with those things. But one of the great hopes for the future, I would say, is this whole expansion of democratization and individual voices that are coming up, and the YouTubers and the YouTube thing that is happening. Initially, when internet did break in, we all felt that was a highly democratizing thing. In between, something happened to it because of the social media like Facebook and Twitter. They were capturing the markets and the monetizing it, making it another controlled business of sorts, interfering with the sort of natural processes of flow, things like that. But now I find that some of the best journalists are on YouTube. Nageshwar being one of them. There is Ravish Kumar, there is Tulasi Chandu, a lot of people who do an extraordinary amount of committed research about any issue that's coming up. And then they enlighten us. They constantly are giving us a lot of well-verified, good quality information and analysis all the time. And they work very hard. Immediately after something happens, they are there with their perspective, with their information, and it's such a valuable thing. And no wonder they have a very good following. So, what we need to watch out, of course, now is the tremendous amount of unease the structures of power have about some of these activities on internet. They're trying to control the digital space. They're trying to bring in new laws. They're also trying to arbitrarily interfere with the flow of information. And it's a challenge. Many of us don't seem to pay attention. Maybe we do internally, but we don't speak about it. But many of us don't seem to be concerned about what's happening with these new data laws, new things that are regulatory things that are coming up. Often regulation of any kind of thing that has been there in India, I don't know about other countries, it's always been used against political opposition. Initially it comes in the name of controlling misinformation or controlling this or that. But ultimately the axe falls on political dissenters. So I don't see anything different happening with the new regulation, because that's been our experience. And this is not about one government, all governments do. That insecurity of the power, whenever they are in power, people are in power, there's tremendous amount of insecurity which shows up in various ways in these regulatory disapplication that happens. So I think while there is quite an exciting future, that we don't have to depend on mainstream big money channels and media, we have a wide variety of sources now of high quality that is existing right now. But we also need to watch out for the regulatory interference that might spoil it all for us. But in a huge democracy, a noisy democracy like us, I'm not very sure if they will succeed in shutting all voices down. I'm not very sure. So that's the source of my optimism, partly. Because people will always find other ways of some of the greatest authoritarian regimes have always found their match at some point and have not managed to continue their authoritarianism. Things change. History is like that. And that is also a sense of optimism I have about media today. About not so much media, but about the information environment today. So I really wish Nageshwar a great time post-retirement, and we look forward to all your activities that are, whatever you have up your sleeve, plans, and wish you all the best. And thank you, Steve and Journalism Department, for allowing me to speak here. Thanks.